Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're setting the stage for a really fascinating journey. We're going to zoom all the way out to look at the broad, beautiful philosophy of indigenous and traditional knowledge. And then we're going to zoom right back in to examine the stark, on-the-ground economic realities of the tribal artisans who actually create these cultural artifacts. It's a story of survival, culture, aesthetic beauty, and, well, hard economics. Let's get started.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at defining indigenous knowledge, transforming Chinese sculpture, the folk arts of India, demographics of tribal crafts, the tribal handicraft economy, and finally, the artisan's struggle.
Section 1, Defining Indigenous Knowledge, Survival, Culture, and the Ecosystem. To truly understand the art, we really need to establish a baseline of who creates it. When we use the word traditional, it's super easy to just think of it as a synonym for, the past. But looking at this definition, it's not quite that simple. In this context, traditional actually refers to small-scale societies that are deeply and ordinarily dependent on wildlife and specific ecosystems. We're talking about everything from the raw materials they use in their crafts to the regional crops that feed their families. So their cultural practice isn't just a hobby on the side. It's a matter of absolute cultural survival. If a group loses its core cultural practices or resources, you really have to wonder if that culture can survive at all. So the crucial point here is that we often just toss around words like knowledge, belief, and tradition like they mean the exact same thing, right? But they actually represent distinct, highly specialized tools within indigenous epistemologies. Knowledge is the factual data. Think cosmological observations or specialized techniques for planting and harvesting. Belief covers the religious concepts that shape their entire worldview. And tradition? Well, that's the actual practice, the daily techniques used to make specialized tools. Together, these are conveyed through oral narratives that literally track human histories and survival skills across generations. Section 2, Transforming Chinese Sculpture, the East meets West. Let's shift geographically to see how traditional philosophies collide with modern global trends. Now, what's really interesting here is the profound contrast in aesthetic philosophies. Western art, especially before Impressionism came along, heavily emphasized figurative modeling, rule, order, and narration, is deeply focused on individual creation. Eastern art, on the other hand, values a feeling, an idea, and a rhythm. It's all about the expression of the soul and the unity of the whole, trying to truly capture the cultural state and the spirit of the times. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens with contemporary Chinese sculpture. As Western influences spread eastward, Chinese sculptors absorbed those modern, realistic art forms and multi-vocabulary styles. But, and this is key, they didn't lose their roots. They consciously inherited that traditional national freehand brushwork. You might be wondering, how exactly does a 2D brushwork style translate into a 3D sculpture? Well, it means stepping away from rigid, hyper-realistic anatomy and leaning into fluid, abstract, and expressive forms. By blending the East and the West, contemporary sculpture highlights the modern era while paying a massive tribute to traditional imagery.
Section 3, Folk Arts of India, a Catalog of Heritage. We're heading to India now for a deep dive into explicit, exquisite regional art forms. India's folk and tribal arts speak volumes about its rich heritage. Each school has its own incredibly distinct style. You have Madhubani paintings from Bihar, which are known for these eye-catching geometric patterns. There are Kangra paintings from Himachal Pradesh, and Warli folk paintings from Maharashtra that brilliantly use simple shapes to depict the vibrant, chaotic energy of village life. And then you have Tanjore paintings from South India. They literally incorporate real gold into the canvases to depict local deities and heroes. I mean, it is just a stunning display of material culture.
Traditional painting acts as a scaffold to our past. It's an incredibly effective medium of social custom because it materializes human values, convictions, and conduct. Think about it. Compared to molding or sculpting stone, painting is way simpler to execute. That's exactly why, all the way back in the Stone Age, early humans picked it as a statement of their creative energies. It was a massive leap forward in human history that helped solidify how communities thought and what they felt they needed to share.
Section 4, Demographics of Tribal Crafts, the people behind the art. Let's transition from the art itself to the people actually making it. The sheer scale of this demographic detail is absolutely staggering. India actually holds the largest concentration of tribal populations in the entire world. There are 697 tribes officially notified by the central government. And more than half of this entire demographic is concentrated in just a handful of states, places like Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Orissa, and Gujarat.
So, tribal people constitute 8.14% of India's total population. Now, 8% might look like a tiny slice on a graph, but in a country as populous as India, we're talking tens of millions of people. And remember our definition from earlier? Their entire lifestyle is conditioned by diverse and isolated ecosystems, often secluded and totally cut off from the rest of the country's basic infrastructure.
And here is where the economics really come into play. About 58% of the tribal population makes up the workforce, but look closely at how that workforce is divided. 55% of them are cultivators, mostly marginal and small farmers. What this means on the ground is that their agricultural produce is rarely enough to sustain the household all year round, especially since they rely heavily on unpredictable monsoon rains. So creating handicrafts isn't just an aesthetic pursuit for them, it is an absolute critical survival skill passed down from their forefathers to bridge that income gap.
Section 5. The Tribal Handicraft Economy, from barter to the weekly market. We're now moving from demographics into the actual mechanics of how these crafts are traded.
When we look at tribal handicrafts, we can methodically step through three broad categories. First, consumer goods. These are utilitarian items made from readily available natural materials, things like cane and bamboo turned into baskets, footwear, and smoking pipes. Second, processing industries, which are minor forest products meant for self-consumption or exchange. And third, decorative items like jewelry, headgears, and wood or stone deities. The takeaway here is that these aren't just art pieces meant to sit in a pristine gallery. They are objects of daily utility and survival.
Historically, this tribal economy was a closed, undifferentiated barter system based almost entirely on mutual help. Lending between community members didn't involve interest at all, it was just governed by custom. But slowly, market economies began to appear around religious festivals. Plus, demands for outside items like specialized metal tools or manufactured clothes started increasing. This birthed the weekly markets, locally known as huts. Going from a self-sufficient barter economy to exchanging crafts for currency in a weekly market changed the entire landscape.
Section 6. The artisan's struggle, the true cost of craft. Let's see how this builds to a pretty dark climax, focusing on the severe exploitation within this newly formed market economy.
Here is the harsh reality detailed in our source material. When these weekly markets opened up, private traders and middlemen flooded the scene. Tribal artisans used to sell their products directly, but now middlemen swoop in and purchase these incredibly skilled crafts at throwaway prices. And it gets worse. When seasonal crops inevitably fail, artisans need cash immediately just to eat. Moneylenders step in to provide that cash at completely exorbitant interest rates. To service this insurmountable debt, the artisans are forced into a vicious cycle, mass-producing their traditional crafts and selling them to that exact same network of middlemen for pennies. 500%. I really want you to absorb that number. According to the source, there is an estimated 500% markup between the tiny price the tribal artisan receives at the weekly market and the price the ultimate consumer pays after it passes through wholesalers and retailers. The artisans, the actual keepers of this inherited generational art, live largely below the poverty line, completely alienated from the true value of their own heritage. Fortunately, there's a major push to protect these vital skills. The government has recognized this massive exploitative gap. By setting up government-backed handicrafts emporiums in major cities, they're attempting to completely cut out those middlemen, allowing artisans to capture the true market value of their work. They're also encouraging government institutions to host national and international exhibitions. The whole goal is to allow artisans to show their skills to a broader audience directly, making sure this traditional art survives despite the heavy odds stacked against these households.
As we fight to protect the future of these crafts, we're still uncovering the secrets of their past. To wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a couple of fascinating historical mysteries from our source material. Was the Proto-Shiva seal of the ancient Indus Valley civilization actually a precursor to modern Shiva images? And did ancient Greek sculptors really rely on the famous lost wax bronze casting method? The history of traditional visual practices is vast, it's complex, and it's full of mysteries just waiting to be uncovered. Keep questioning, keep learning, and thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.